How are we? I'm so ready for this, actually. This is like the best topic I've ever seen on call out. So, like, yeah.
Oh, hi. I'm excited too, but I don't know. It's kind of nervous thing as well because I mean I love this topic so much. So just like oh,
It's actually a really good topic. And so, like, I'm actually really excited for this. So, yeah. So, let's get this started because we might actually run out of time.
all right. Okay. So feminist movements put a ban on pornography sites or pornography itself, and so let me just define the terms first. Feminist movements as I define, it is a movement that actually wants for all people, or maybe liberation from sexist role patterns and domination and oppression. And it is mainly composed of people who actually originate from the philosophical principles of equality. And pornography is a printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings.
Mhm.
So this is what these terms are. And so the reason I actually wanted to discuss this motion today is because there, like, people know that this is actually creating a kind of impact on the society itself. And some communities actually tried that people tried making people aware of it, that hey, like this is not good, or maybe you shouldn't watch it or so. But then awareness or all those things could not actually make a proper impact on stopping people from watching it. Is watching it has a lot of this benefits, which I'll be explaining later in my arguments. So that's why, like that's why a serious step for this would be a ban, because as I said, the awareness campaigns and everything people actually put on before is not actually working here. And yeah, so that's actually my base here. I don't know if you'd want to add something to it so that I can actually get a hint of where you are on.
Okay. I mean, first things first, like, I am also a feminist. So, I'm not going to be one of those crazy people that's like, oh, on so much. Like, no, there is feminist basis to where I want to go with this. I agree with the definitions. I don't think that anything of that should be changed. And so, yeah, I mean, I think probably worth noting before we go into the actual debate itself that not all of the women who are in this industry are coerced into it, and not all of them make that choice. So obviously, quite a few women actively make that conscious choice to enter this industry, while quite a substantial number of women also are coerced into it for a number of different reasons, and they will come out later because they are part of some of my arguments. But yeah, so I think where this debate looks like it's going for the moment is exactly where I'm happy for it to go. So I'm happy to go for the next step and like actually get into what the actual debate, the debate itself.
Okay. Just one like clarification. I think this debate should actually like get. I mean, every point we make should actually have a connection to feminism principles. Because if in case we just debate on whether or not we should ban pornography, it'll just be a different debate. So yeah, I just want to make sure that both of us actually go under feminism principles to like.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I have so many points and I don't know where to begin. This is so overwhelming for me. All right, so I'll just start by my one point I'd want to make. So in terms of point, like as I said, feminism is protective of one's body, of it actually it does not support the idea of oppression, of exploitation of one's body. And like you see, there's a survey that actually tells that the average lifespan of a porn star is just 36 years. And you see the normal life expectancy of an American, or maybe any person, like I would say it would be 70 or 78 or so, but then the average life expectancy of a porn star is just 36 years, which is comparatively like half the actual amount of what it is like for a normal individual. So now what I mean by this statement is that there is something that's going beyond this this industry. Like how could actually that happen? So what happens is that I'll just give you two amazing explanations for why this is happening. The first one could be because when one actually goes into pornography, they actually distort certain kind of bodily, like the natural bodily functions. Now, if you see in terms of having sex, now there are a lot of changes that happens when both male and female, especially females in terms of reproduction and everything. So now when they're in pornography, like pornographic porn industry, like what happens is that they have to, like, you know, actually challenge those natural bodily functions to actually to be fit, or maybe, I don't know, like, you know, to be actually eligible enough to perform the videos. So that's one of the reasons why their bodily, like, metabolism could be distorted. And the second could be that the survey itself shows that many of the causes of death were AIDS, suicide, drug overdose, cancer, AIDS, suicide, and it was heroin overdose, drug overdose, a lot of those things. Now, what this actually tries to show is that there could be an underlying depression or maybe coercion, which actually you stated as well. So it's not just as simple as it seems. You know, it's there is certain kind of exploitation going, maybe a chemical like drugs or something, or maybe the exploitation within changes within the body itself, as I said, like challenging the bodily functions. So yeah, so that's the kind of exploitation that's happening, which I propose, and that would be one of the things I'd like to say on why we should do it. So yeah, I'll just pass on the mic to you.
Okay, cool. So the first and only response I have to that is that all of the problems that you just listed are not exclusive to the porn industry. They are also applicable to the sex work industry. Now, does that then mean that you would support a ban of anyone in the sex work industry as a whole, not just those in porn? Because the types of problems that you're talking about, that distortion of natural body functions, that still happens when women enter the sex work industry, in terms of working in places like brothels, working as prostitutes and sex workers and those kinds of professions, and the same with that second point that you made in terms of drugs, STDs, suicide, those kinds of things. So they're not exclusive to the porn industry. They're still going to happen in that sex work industry, which is part of the reason why I would suggest that a ban is not necessarily going to fix those problems, because they're still going to happen. But also that to do one, you have to do the other. Now, the reason why I would suggest that you have to do one and not the other is because at the point in which the feminist movement actively supports the sex work industry and supports that women's autonomy and that liberation of women's sexuality, it shows that we support those who are in the sex industry who are getting paid for sex. But if we put a ban on porn, we then show that we do not support those women who are getting paid for sex but are getting recorded and having that material being exported to a group of people. Now, at that point, what that shows that the feminist movement is actually fractured, in the sense that we support a group of women for having that sexual liberation, but we also do not support another group of women for basically doing the same thing in a different context. And so at that point, that shows that the feminist movement is actually weak and fractured. And so I think that that's really, really important that we show that solidarity, but also at the point in which the feminist movement is able to actively and publicly support something like this and support the women that are in this industry, it shows that we're not going to lock them out and disengage them from feminism. Because the thing to note here is that porn will always exist in some capacity. We can ban it as much as we want, but likely one of or both of the next two things are likely to happen. Firstly, it's likely to happen that a black market will be created, and so people will still operate this industry under the guise of, you know, in the same way that black markets operate. And secondly, there will still be, you know, amateur people filming them having sex with their partners or with whoever their sexual partners are, and exporting that to their different circles of people, and in that instance, that porn still happens. And so at the point in which we, especially with that black market, at the point in which we lock the women who have been coerced into that industry out, even though they're still going to be part of that, then we show that we're not actually supporting them, and then we disengage them from the feminist movement as a whole, which is really harmful because, you know, they obviously didn't choose to be there in the first place. and so we should be supporting them and doing everything we can to actually make it a better experience for them. And so that's just like the first point of many that I have. And so I'll pass it back to you, and then we'll keep this debate flowing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So your point was mainly focused on that the ban would actually not bring something positive. So that's why ban is not actually a solution, or maybe there could be black market existing and all. So to which I would say, and you also actually talked about how porn industry brings oh my God, I just get stuck on these words. Liberation and women. So which I do not agree to, because I think porn industry is creating a standard for a woman, for not just women, like for even for men, for women, and a perfect sex to actually be feminine. If you see, it's creating a standard, and it's so acute. Like if you see. Now, what happens with this kind of a standard porn industry is promoting is that women are limited. Women cannot self-express themselves, actually, because whatever they do is actually expected from what is done in the porn industry itself. So now people can never actually go beyond that and then explore themselves on what they can actually pursue sexually, or maybe pursue sexually. So it's kind of pornography, like it's a sort of false advertising about women, about men, about sexuality. And this is not actually providing liberation to women at all, or maybe not to any human individuals, I'd say, because it's restricting autonomy. It is reproducing, and then it is reinforcing a dominant public perception of the nature of women, of men, and sexuality, that actually prevents women or men to actually explore their own conceptions of sexuality and the good life. So it is not at all. It is not at all providing liberation. It is actually confining those thoughts into a standard. And not just this. Like if you see. Like it just everything seems perfect when you actually go through, like pornography sites and all. So as I said, it seizes away self-expression from people, and then I don't think it provides liberation to people at all. Talking about, as you said, like feminism movements, banning this would actually be creating black market and all. And yes, which I agree to, like that is completely possible now. But now if in case the feminist movement is actually taking a responsibility to ban it, now even the feminist movement is itself responsible to take a stance and actually and actually try to like work on it to at least an extent. I mean, like we do agree that there's certain harm from pornography, but that doesn't mean that we leave it because there's no solution to it. I think there should be at least a small improvement that can be made, or that can be actually started from the feminist movement. And if you see, like it's just doing a lot of negative things, and I'll just be moving on to I think you should.
Okay, well, I'll take over from there. Right. So, in terms of, I'd just like to premise this by saying that I don't think that porn, the way that it is now, is going to get all of these benefits, and so which is why I would prop a counter model, so to speak. But before I get to that, just talking about like this false advertising and how it restricts autonomy, and it doesn't help the dominant rhetoric that surrounds that self-expression of women in that sexual context and those kinds of things. At the point in which you conceded that black market still happens, regardless of whether the feminist movement takes a stand on that or not, at the point in which the black market still happens, those things are still going to exist because people are still going to be accessing porn in some capacity or another, which then means that limiting of self-expression is still going to happen. Now, what I would propose is that we feed porn into the narrative that surrounds sex-positive feminism and how we can actually use that to prop that rhetoric. And so, given that we need to be looking at things like sexual liberation of women, the best way to do that is to take over the porn industry. Now, how does that work? Firstly, that means that the feminist movement should, instead of banning porn, we should be subjecting these companies to a degree of accountability, so that they're not actually proliferating these messages that women are submissive, that they exist as a tool of the patriarchy to get to fulfill their sexual needs, those kinds of things. This also looks like at the point in which we publicly support the porn industry, it means that those women in this industry are able to, because they know that they have the support of the feminist movement, they are able to boycott these companies that produce these scenes and those kinds of things, and literally not do anything for these companies until they get some form of benefit from that. And that looks like the changes that I'm about to go through. And so what that does is because if you no longer have women who are willing to make these films, then the companies lose their revenue. They lose the videos in that first instance. And so that's important that we support the women who are able to actively change this industry. And so these changes look like things, when you open some sites, the first thing you see are some like really, really bad categories of porn. And so like, I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them, particularly things like rape porn and the age gap that apparently is really attractive to people. I mean, I don't get it, but that's what happens. And so it looks like moving, if we can influence those changes, what we would do, we would move those categories to somewhere else in the site, where to find them, you actually have to actively look for them. It looks like creating more scenarios where women have more freedom, women are in control, and they're shown in those positions of dominance, so that they're not essentially being controlled by whatever the male actor wants to do, because that helps break down that narrative that women are only existing to fulfill the sexual needs of men. Thirdly, that we would also create more scenarios where consent and things like that are always explicit and happen more often than they currently do, which shows that also you can't do things unless you have full consent from that person. And so the reason why I think those changes are important is because it's fairly intuitive to say that many young men in particular, their first experience with sex and the world of sex is through watching porn online. That's just a thing that happens with a lot of young men. And so at the point in which the current way that we see porn at the moment is not going to do anything for them, that's why we're bringing those changes in, so we can actually break down that narrative. Because even when you take the porn industry out of the equation, the dominant narrative is still that women exist to fulfill those needs of men's sexuality. And so at the point in which we can actually boycott this industry to make it have those changes that we want, then that's a net benefit for us, and that's far better than simply banning this industry, which actually doesn't help break those narratives down. Because when you break the industry, when you ban the industry, those narratives are still going to exist in society. And so I think at that point, at the point in which we can change the industry to create things like feminist porn, or to make it more feminist, and to help break down those exploitative narratives, then I would say that that's a far better benefit to just banning it, and because that actually will lead to that better liberation and autonomy of women's sexuality. And so that's what I have to say about that. And so I've been talking for a while, so have the mic back.
Okay. Alrighty. Let me just see where I am on. Okay. Okay. All right. So what I understand from your viewpoint is that it's as I said, it's more focused on the idea that you these ideas, or maybe the porn whatever it actually runs under is still going to be there, and yeah, that's why we shouldn't do it. So because it is still going to exist. And so in this case, like, I think I would actually like to hear, like, I'll be saying a few things, but before that, I just want to, like, later on, like when your turn comes, I just want to hear more on, like, except then these things, like, except then the fact that this might still going to exist, what, like, other specific or maybe substantive reasons would you like to give as to why pornography should not be banned?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, the idea that it could exist, it could still exist or not, is like, I mean, it could, but still, like, it's more like an assumption, not so clear. So maybe if in case you could add more substantive to it, so it'll be easier for me to actually talk on it. All right. So talking on these ideas, I think what I'd like to say is that now when you I'll just move on to the next point, that would be about the idea of child pornography. Now, if you see the current data, what that actually suggests is that the current data actually suggests that children, I mean, even below, like even below 9 years old, that they're actually prone to pornography. They're actually looking at the sites and everything. Now, what I would suggest is that I don't mean that watches pornography, like, or porn, sites, actually becomes a rapist or something. I'm not actually advocating that. But what I mean is that they actually, now in the case when they're actually shaping their brains, like they're actually being prone to something they're not emotionally prepared for. And not just this. Now, what happens in the like in this kind of, in like the sexual industry, if you see that, like there are certain ideas that will be promoted by this kind of videos that will actually, yeah, that is actually be accepted by the people. I mean, the children will actually not understand that there are lights, cameras, editing, like, and a lot of illusion that's happening. They actually learn whatever is actually shown there. So if you see, there are so many kind of porn videos that where we can actually see that women are um, abused, or maybe like forcefully actually pushed into it. But even if a woman is actually saying no, or even if actually a woman is, like, brutally pushed against the wall, it is just shown that, like, it's fine. That is how it is shown in actually most of the videos. Now, what the children actually learn from this kind of ideas is that no doesn't actually mean no. I mean, it'll be fine even if in case you're going ahead of it, because no doesn't actually mean no. So I don't actually tell you that it it directly like correlates with the idea that, hey, if in case someone is watching a porn, that person becomes a rapist. But my idea is that there are certain kind of ideas that are promoted by this kind of porn industry that will be taken by children. And now, not just about this, what about those children who are actually engaged in the pornography? And the problem is that they are not, as I said, they are not actually emotionally, or maybe they're not actually conscious about themselves making such a big decision, and this is just like, if you see, this is, if in case this is actually expected to rise in years, and it is really going to be a tough, like, tough place. I mean, if children who are actually not even children are actually subjected to this kind of things without being having made a rational decision on it, without actually being so much aware of it, and that's happening actually, and they're just, going on in the industry and then doing things, which is a very, very um, unacceptable thing. And as I said, banning pornography, I would not actually tell you that it'll like suddenly, maybe if you ban pornography today, tomorrow it'll be like, hey, like pornography is done, there's no porn sites, no black market at all. I think whenever ban or such kind of actions you take, like, actually take place, they always like, you actually always need to have a certain time for the actual implementation, or maybe the actual proceduring of those kind of actions. So it's not something that's actually going to happen overnight. But then, if in case you're not even taking a step, that's actually still going to exist. Now, the difference I tell you about prostitution, I do not advocate that prostitution is good and pornography is bad here. For me, they all just come on the same level. But what happens in these two kind of industries is that the prostitution is not so reachable to people. If you see, like, the porn industry, the pornographic sites, I mean, you could just head it up on one corner of the world and then do it through, like, but then like the prostitution, it is not so reachable to many people. Like, if in case prostitution is reachable to just 5% people, pornographic sites are reachable to 100% of those people. So that's the main problem here that is existing. And yes, as I said, like, it is completely going against the idea of feminism, because it is violating self-expression. It is not letting one person actually self-express themselves, even if in case they're really doing it, there's a director actually consciously making a decision of how actually they should do their moves and all. There's no self-expression, not even from a perspective of a performer, and not also the perspective of a viewer. So it is just a conduct that's happening. Porn industry is a total idea of a conduct that's happening, that's promoting bad, and that's actually creating standards, and it's really bad.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, in terms of child porn, which I think was actually fairly good point, the two responses that I would have to children being exposed to this industry, and the messages that get pushed onto them. Firstly, I would suggest that that's not a reason to ban all porn because young children watch it. In the same vein that we wouldn't ban things like R-rated films or very, very violent or very scary films just because children watch them. And in the same vein that we don't ban other things that we understand are bad for children, but good for adults just because children engage in that. And so obviously I don't support kids, being engaged with this industry, but I don't think that the fact that kids engage with that is a reason to ban it entirely. Firstly, I would suggest that that's, just to some extent bad parenting, and the parents should take more of an active role in that, not feminism, because it is not the job of feminism to look after kids. But also that, like I said, when it comes to other things that are incredibly harmful to kids, like incredibly scary films which can leave, very traumatic experiences, and, basically do very large, significant damage to that child's mental health. We don't ban those films from existing just because kids engage with that. And so I wouldn't say that that's a very, the best reason as to why you should specifically ban the entire industry. But secondly, in terms of kids that are in the industry itself and not making that rational decision. Again, we wouldn't necessarily ban or outlaw prostitution just because of child sex trafficking. That's not to say that I support children being involved in that industry, because I don't. And so I think that there are other ways that feminism can combat that without, exclusively banning porn, especially because, as we've both said, it is very likely that this industry is still going to exist in another capacity. Therefore, these children are still going to be engaged. And so what I think would be a better mechanism to do that would be for feminism to actually advocate and put pressure on, more governments and more organizations to actually fight this and to do more about it, as opposed to simply just banning it, because at the point in which you ban it and it still exists, those harms are never actually going to be fixed. These children are still going to be involved in that industry. Some of them may escape that, but quite a few of them will still be involved. And so in terms of feminism, the porn industry goes against the outcomes of feminism and what feminism stands for. That's why I would say that feminism should actually reclaim the industry and implement those changes that I talked about a little bit earlier. I don't think that the industry as it so stands, it is very feminist. I don't think it's very good for feminism at all, which is why I would support those changes being made rather than the ban. And in terms of some of the substantive reasons as to why I think we should support these changes being made and veto the ban. Firstly, because as I've already gone over, the ban will, the industry will always exist. I'm not going to go into that because we've already gone through that. But secondly, what this does, what porn does, is it gives people the opportunity to kind of like express whatever fantasies they have in private, and so that to some extent comes at the that comes at the detriment of some of the people that are in those scenarios. But at the same time, at the point in which we transform the industry to support the people working in that industry, then that harm gets mitigated. But what this does is it means that people aren't translating their fantasies and their desires into real world scenarios. And so what this looks like, it looks like people, less people going out and actually sexually assaulting someone because they can, get their pleasure fulfilled from watching two actors from doing that in private, as opposed to actually going out and, sexually assaulting someone. At the point in which this ban comes into place and there's no longer that outlet for people to express those fantasies, because some of them are quite bad, it means that they're likely, those fantasies are likely to not be fulfilled in that private environment where it is just that one person, or maybe, that group of men, because I don't know, some people are into that stuff. And it means that it's like, it's far more likely that they will actually translate that into real world scenarios. And so I think in that instance, a ban is going to be very, very ineffective, because those real world sexual encounters are likely to end that way. And so I would say that in this instance, that changing narrative and moving those kinds of things to places where these people have to actually look for them, as opposed to banning them, is going to be very effective. But also, thirdly, when you ban this industry, the people you lock out the women that are in it, and you disengage those women from the feminist movement, which is not very feminist of any of us. To say that we support some women and not all of them, especially when it comes to the intersectional women who are stereotypically associated with industry. And so the types of women that I would talk about there are women of a low socioeconomic background who are coerced into this industry to make some money so that they can, survive, do those kinds of things. It also looks like women who move to a country where they're not very familiar with the language and the culture, and so they're being coerced that way as well. And without stereotyping, it's very common to look at, here in Australia, it's very common to look through the classifieds of like a newspaper or something, and a lot of the sex work advertising and those kinds of things are, young, petite Asian women. And so that's the narrative that we have here. And so they're the types of women that are also coerced into this industry. And at the point in which, firstly, the industry still exists, but secondly, after it exists, when you ban it, and then show that the feminist movement doesn't actually support those women, then you lock them out from engaging with feminism, which just isn't very feminist of any of us. But we need to also be supporting those women and making and putting pressure on these companies and these people who exploit those women to actually end that exploitation, rather than just banning it and allowing for that exploitation to happen in the black market, which is likely to happen. Because at the point in which that black market exists, these women are still going to be exploited. It's just going to be less public. And so that is to say that when that happens, the harms of porn are actually not fixed, because these women are still being exploited in an industry that's not being banned, or that still exists after being banned. And so I would say that. But also, when you say that, we're going to support these women who get paid, in one context of getting paid for sex but not the others, then it shows that the feminist movement is actually very fractured, and then we lose a lot of support, firstly because a lot of women who would support, who might agree with the types of things that I'm saying, they tend to support the feminist movement a little bit less. But it also shows the rest of the world that the feminist movement is fractured and does not have the capital to actually advocate for women's rights, or the equal rights of people, and so that's very harmful for the movement itself. And so I will pass back to you, because that's kind of what I've got to say on that. And yeah, so passing it back.
Okay. Oh my God, I can hear my own sound. Where's that? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I guess I'm good. Yeah, I can hear myself sometimes. All right. So in terms of child porn, what I have to say is that, so as you said, like there's still. Oh no, what was your point? Oh.
Okay, so the point was, actually, let me just get this page back up. So the point was that when it comes to things that children are exposed to that are still harmful for them, we wouldn't ban those. Yep. So yeah, that was the first point that I made.
Okay. So in this case, what I would actually tell you is that firstly, there are so many children, like 70% of the children actually are subjected to unwilling pornographic views. 70% of those people are actually subjected to those kind of views. Now, in those cases, they're not actually willingly doing it, but then there are cases when it's actually happening. Like even if in case you say spam and all, different kind of sites, there are so many cases actually that's applicable to this. So now what happens in case those kind of children are actually subjected to unwilling porn? Now, as I said, they're not emotionally prepared to actually go through whatever that happens in. And being a child, like definitely there's a curiosity, like for something that opens up quick, maybe they could watch it, and then what happens after that is that they're not actually emotionally prepared for what happens. Now that's a big problem. So as I said, in terms of child porn, like as you said, like if in case someone watches a R-rated movie or something, why is it not banned? But why pornography? Because pornography is actually subjected to people unwillingly, 70%, as I said. And okay, talking about how you say porn actually lets people experiences fantasies. Now, I have a point on that one. So, what Okay, the problem with fantasizing is that people are actually fantasizing about raping a child, about abusing a woman. Like, so these are the kind of things people are fantasizing. They're not actually, because they don't, like, if you see, some people, if in case they're like not, they're not enough to what sex looks like. Now that's what they're going to learn from. Now they're fantasizing a rape of a child, abusing a woman. They're fantasizing things, or maybe the perfect things that are actually shown in those videos of pornographic sites. So, and that's the problem here. And in fact, Google's own data actually suggests that each month around like people in Britain actually type Britain, oh, Britney Spears naked into the search engine. So like the children actually are doing it. So you see, like, people are not fantasizing about the desires, but they are fantasizing about something that is actually not acceptable. As I said, raping a child and all. So now when you say we should not lock out of women from those kind of pornographic like sites, because that would actually go against movement. What I believe is that feminist movements actually should be held responsible to do that. Feminist movements actually are the one who can actually do that and who actually should do that. I think in terms of this motion, like you actually talked about a lot of things about how like there should be changes made and all. I mean, I don't like, if in case this was a policy debate, like, I would actually rather go into it so much, but because we're not actually dealing like on policy here, much about the principle, much about the idea based on it. So that's actually like, I mean, for me it's actually difficult to go like say something on it, because as I said, it's more about the policy you're bringing here. um okay. And all right. So yeah, that's. I think it's. I mean, empowering feminist movements actually take a responsibility of empowering women, and sexual industry, porn industry, is not empowering them anyway. If in case you argue that it's empowering their sexuality, it's not even doing that, because it's seizing their freedom of expression as well. It's actually it's making them, and as I said, like in different cases there's coercion, and then they're actually brutally facing it, and then maybe sometimes what happens is that they're actually on a certain condition, and then like taking advantage of it. If in case you see, even in terms of prostitution, like such people are targeted who are actually going through like maybe um not a mental state, or maybe like you know that's or maybe going through like uh, some difficult financial conditions, or these are the kind of things that people actually, this kind of people are actually vulnerable to this kind of sites. And it's not even like open, I mean, it's not so strong enough I mean, like we're not so sure enough that we can actually see that there are some consenting adults who are doing it. And as I said, like even the result shows that there are like porn stars who are dying from like um drug abuse and all. So it's just the idea that it's actually there's a lot going on behind the industry itself, and then you're actually rejecting all your natural body functions, which is why like the expectancy of your like of a porn site just 37 years. So there, I mean, you're not protecting life. If in case feminism is about protecting or liberating life, it's about empowering life. You're not empowering it, because in a way, if you see, you are decreasing the life expectancy itself. You're not giving the freedom of expression. You are actually subjecting oneself to like to deeply offensive and to like to sexually explicit content, which is an actually affront to decent family, religion, values, and all. So if you see, like porn industry can never feminist movements actually started as a movement that could actually give women a good life. I mean, yes, in terms of like basic morals of basic principles of equality. So now, if in case you see like porn industry is never going to give them a good life, because if you see like like it's about the societal good. Like they're never going to be accepted in a society. They're, what about their dignity? Like it's because it's intrinsically morally wrong. I mean, like that's kind of a behavior that threatens the traditional family, religious institutions, and like and people as a whole, the mindset and everything. Because it just like it shows how you could just like have sex with your teacher for extra credit, blah blah blah. It's just like something that's very disturbing, very disturbing. And so even if in case they have to come out as come out of the life as a porn star and live like as a normal human being, it's not going to be possible for them. So it's not creating a life of dignity or life of actually respect for them. It's actually creating a life of I don't know, life of, what do you call it? It's not a good life, you know. I mean, people will not actually look at them as being wow, like wow. I mean, like I respect her, you know. Says, I mean, you know, that's not how it comes. And then I think feminist movements hold the main idea of empowering women in such a way that someone else is respectful to that person. The work is actually appreciated, and then the work actually creates a positive impact to the society. That's how we the feminist movements actually are trying to empower women. But then porn industry does it nowhere. And then I think, as you said, like, you know, the black market could still be existing. I do like agree to this assumption that it could be existing, but the fact is that if in case you're not taking a single step on it, it's never going to happen. And if in case rape is happening, and then if in case I'm not, like, you know, charging people for doing it because like it's going to happen, and then maybe like the person could come again and then rape me, or maybe another person, like, you know, next to me. So it doesn't mean that you are actually going to be silenced. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, porn industry is silencing people. So that should not happen. You should actually ban it. And then, yeah, I think you can go ahead.
Okay, so firstly, I would start. Hearing I would start by saying that to some extent, this actually, I would say that this probably could be a policy debate. You know, the outcome is better outcome for women, and the way to get that is either banning it or, you know, not banning it, and the way to not ban it is to have those changes. And so I would say that's what I have to say on that. But in terms of fantasies, right? And so people fantasize about things like, you know, the rape of a child, the sexual abuse of a person, and things like that. Banning the industry is not going to fix that, because those people have those fantasies because of, you know, who they are as a person. And so those fantasies are still going to exist at the point in which you ban this industry. It's not going to fix those industries, those fantasies. What that's actually going to do is it's going to remove the outlet for them to do it, you know, where they sit and watch two actors who have actively consented to this, to doing that and filming that, as opposed to going out and doing it in their real world sexual encounters. And so that's what I have to say about that. At the moment, the porn industry, as it currently stands, I would agree that it doesn't empower women, which is why I would like to make these changes. And so what that means is that when we make those changes, we're able to have that sexual liberty of women. Firstly, because we recognize that two consenting adults should be able to do to commit whatever acts that they feel that they want to commit. And, you know, as long as these two porn stars are actively consenting to what they're doing, then that's fine. But also we should be, you know, showing that in these scenarios. But then that's very minor. So moving on from there, I would say that at the point in which you actively tell women that they cannot make choices to enter this industry because, you know, getting paid for sex is a bad thing for them to do, we actually limit their sexual liberty and their sexual autonomy, which is harmful for the feminist movement, especially when we should be focusing on the sexual autonomy of women. And so when it comes to, you know, threatening their, I guess you could say their life of dignity, where, you know, they should be, where they shouldn't be able to see that, you know, they can have sex with their teachers for extra credits, those kinds of things. At that point, like I said earlier, when we implement these changes, we would move things like that, you know, show those women in those degrading positions to places where the people who want to watch those videos, they have to actually actively look for that category, as opposed to, you know, just openly seeing it, because that's a fantasy that is always going to exist. But and so people are always going to want to watch things like that, and those scenarios are going to be created at the point in which you ban porn anyway. But also those two actors have actively consented to that, because, you know, that they've made that conscious choice. But at the point in which we would move things like that away, and, you know, there's currently no respect and no dignity for porn stars, that is why I would say that we should actually reclaim the sex industry and the sex work industry and the porn industry, so that the feminist movement can advocate on, you know, behalf of these women, to show that they are actual people too, but they have made that conscious choice to consent to doing this, so that they can have that dignity. Because currently the narrative around women and women in sex work and the porn industry is that they do exist as a tool, you know, to fulfill the patriarchy's sexual needs. And so at the point in which, firstly, that porn is still going to exist, that narrative still gets perpetuated. But secondly, at the point in which the feminist movement can reclaim that and take over that and change those narratives, then it means that people who actively choose to have sex and not only those in porn, but also those outside in their real world scenarios, because it's reflected in the porn industry. It means that they're able to be better respected, because the narrative in the porn industry is such that women have that autonomy, and they have made this conscious choice to do that, as opposed to simply existing on the whim of, you know, a male wanting to get himself off. And so I think at the point in which we can make these changes and actually make it better for, firstly, the women in